The traditional model of drug development is being challenged, and rightfully so, out of pure necessity. We'll get to this later, but I was a fractional leader for an organization over the past year and a half that ran out of money.
All right. Hey, Daniel,
Jeff.
we're here. We've been talking about this over a year now. We first met in October of 24.
You got it.
And we've been talking every couple of weeks since. All about the world of med affairs, the world of fractional.
Actually, implementation from a med affairs perspective and how integrated that is, and the big changes that have occurred in the pharma and biotech industry that have really elevated the need for and the appetite for fractional work. And we've been talking about this for a long time, and here we are in Costa Mesa. I drove down from San Francisco to meet with you to record this 3-part series on the rise of fractional work in medical affairs. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. The past year, and the conversations as both of us being career life science professionals, you in-house med affairs, me on the recruiting side of the world, how we've seen the industry evolve, and obviously all of the challenges of the past, 4 years now when it comes to investment and
Or lack thereof.
and just the shrinking of the life sciences market. So we've talked about, both of us, and that's how we first met, right? We met on LinkedIn. You were going through some change. You'd reach out.
Help.
Yeah,
I got downsized for the first time in my career.
Yeah, something new, and then through the course of the year, we've both gone in fractional paths, and so it's been fun and really helpful, having the ongoing conversation, seeing both of our businesses take shape, and seeing the wins starting to come in and figuring out what this marketplace looks like. But then also, I know we've had a lot of larger conversations around just all of our colleagues and gears and all this amazing, all these amazing people, amazing talent in the marketplace. It's too many of which are sitting idle, wanting to contribute, wanting to make a difference, career professionals with this knowledge and expertise. It's, so life-changing patient population, right? And,
Doing right by patients, doing the right things at the right time that will really bring the data that a biotech or a pharma company has to offer in their clinical programs. And how do you bring that to light? How do you bring it to life for patients to improve patient outcomes and the lives of patients? So, Jeff, why don't we talk about what our backgrounds are? So when we start with you, what's been your career?
been really focused, the past 20 years in life sciences on the recruitment side of the house, primarily working, from an external perspective, coming in and helping small to stealth to mid-sized organizations build the talent pools that they need to move drug development forward and get things to markets and keep them safe and make sure the quality is there. So for me, it's all been about teams. It's been across the range of, pharmaceuticals, biotech, medical device, genomics, diagnostics. Fascinating. I get to learn every day. I still feel like it's all brand new, even after 20 years. And in the meantime, I've met brilliant, amazing people all around the world, and still madly in love with it.
That's awesome.
Daniel, how about you? Tell me.
What about me? Okay, yeah. So I'm a scientist, a chemist by formal training, and I started out in the pharmaceutical arena even before I had finished my doctorate with a pharmaceutical called Schering-Plough, and then that got absorbed into Merck. And I started out in R&D. The first 12 years of my career were in R&D, and then I transitioned to med affairs, and that's where I've been for the past 20 plus years. And I love medical affairs. I'm so passionate about it. I started out as a boot on the ground, as an MSL, and worked my way up to senior leadership, senior vice president, head of med affairs for a couple of organizations. So I've launched a number of products. I have experience in 11 therapeutic areas, and I've done every role you can imagine or that we know of in med affairs. So soup to nuts med affairs. And I think there's a lot of value in having somebody with my tenure to help a startup biotech or a startup pharmaceutical organization who they have their initial assets and they're trying to move it forward as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And you said it earlier, the environment has changed post COVID. COVID, there was massive hiring. And then over the last couple years, there has been a lot of rationalization of organizations. Organizations have had to look at their pipeline and reevaluate it, streamline things. And unfortunately, a lot of very talented med affairs, clinical operations, commercial individuals have lost their jobs. And as I indicated earlier, after over 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry, I found myself at the receiving end of the first time of getting downsized. So what do I do? It's a really tough job market out there. There's lots of really talented people in the same boat as I was. That's how I got to know you, Jeff. Are you aware of any opportunities to lead the Med Affairs organization for companies that you're working with? And we kind of found ourselves in kind of the same boat where you had to pivot to a different part. You had all this experience in life science, and you had to go and direct your efforts and your talents toward other sectors to make up for companies weren't doing retained searches. They weren't adding or expanding the teams. They were actually doing the opposite. They were downsizing and so forth. So I reached out to my network, lots of headhunters and so forth, and kept hearing the same thing. There's a lot of people with your level of experience who are looking for the same type of roles, and there's very few and far between. In fact, I had one headhunter who I've worked with over the years say, I I have people like you who've been out of a job for 2 years. I highly recommend that you look for work elsewhere outside the pharmaceutical biotech arena. That was really daunting. That like it's really that bad out there. So, what has been your experience over the last couple of years of you have all this great life science experience. You had to pivot.
Yeah, it's been a huge change in obviously the recruitment market, for life sciences. And through my career, having, looked at things through a variety of lenses, whether that's, direct hire, executive search, global contract forces, study teams, FSPs. There's all these different ways to slice and dice what it means to deliver talent and to move drug development or device development forward. But at the end of the day, if there's no budget, it doesn't matter how you slice and dice it, right? Even though the need remains, right? We need these drugs and these products developed. We need to get them to market, but the will, in a sense, from a way of investment isn't there. And so, yeah, I was finding myself in a similar situation. Having mentors and colleagues, and folks say, maybe you need to work outside of life sciences. Maybe walk away and quite frankly, dip my toe in the water in other areas, but have never been able to walk away from this industry because it's just too robust. I'm too passionate about it.
Right.
And it's what and it's what I know and it's what I believe in. So it's been really interesting, and I think from a glass half full perspective has really forced, I think, all of us to look at things in new ways. And so coming out of, as we come out of this and hopefully sooner than later, the world of life sciences will never look like it did. From an efficiency perspective, from, how talent goes to work, of how products move along. I think there was in the legacy industry a lot of waste that now no one can afford. And so, as we grow out of this, I think that's going to be in a very lean way. And then when you think about, the implications and already the active use of AI to also streamline processes and data, what is this all going to look like, right? Even as investment dollars do come back in.
Absolutely. So thinking about the last year and a half, you know, let's talk about the headwinds. The headwinds. So you see a lot of downsizing, one company after another. A number of companies have actually disappeared, which is really unfortunate. The headwinds of the uncertainty of the current administration, the headwind of the changes at the FDA were certainly causing a lot of consternation with a lot of executives, and probably making them like, "Ooh, maybe we should wait. Maybe we should wait on initiating these hires," and so forth. I think the days of building out your full team and then setting about moving forward with your clinical development initiatives are coming to an end, where, like, do I need to have everyone that I would traditionally need from a drug development perspective on staff, or can I tap into talent when I need it the most and for as long as I need it to get certain things done? It's understandable that organizations are pulling back, and really realizing that they're going to have to stretch the runway of the money that they have on board to last longer. So the traditional model of drug development is being challenged, and rightfully so, out of pure necessity. We'll get to this later, but I was a fractional leader for an organization over the past year and a half that ran out of money. 30 to 40% of early stage companies have less than a year's worth of funding. These are tough times, and it requires tough decisions and really pragmatic decisions to be made in order to move these very important projects forward, so that these companies can develop new therapies that improve patients' lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really interesting, like on the talent front too, because traditionally a company would come to me and say, help me find this person or these people, right? And now the conversation is less about the individual person, but how strategically can we get from A to Z?
Yeah.
Right. We've got X amount of runway. How do we make this happen? At what points do we drop people in? What are the methods in which we can do that? And so it's a little bit less of a headhunt and more a game of chess and checkers, of lining it all up. And I think a lot, it's interesting, just as the world changes, it almost see organizations becoming more almost like supply chain minded. Like if you think about like vertical integration, right? Supply chain, right? And how do we integrate these different pieces along the path, extend this runway, only spend where we need it, when we need it.
Right. Tell us about your foray into a fractional platform. You and other like-minded folks have developed this new innovative platform for providing fractional talent.
You can bring in an operator, you can bring in a CMO to lift a large burden, for moving a project forward or potentially coming in as an interim. But the fractional piece really allows that flexibility to not only move quickly, but hit the ground running so that you're not burning time and capital with like a standard onboarding and a standard, search time frame.
One of the things I experienced over the last year and a half in a consulting capacity and as a fractional leader is coming into an organization that uh, it's their first asset. And their business model was to supply big pharma with their intellectual expertise to design new molecules for the oncology market and so forth. But the company wanted to develop their own oncology asset in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So they did design the molecule, but they didn't have all the talent you would typically have in a medium to large size pharma company or even a small size biotech company. And what they did, they took a totally fractional approach to it because there was risk associated. It's the first time they had done it. The chief development officer hadn't gone through that process before. And what they did is they picked very specific, experienced individuals to come in, and they had more or less a soup to nuts staff, but they were all fractional, focused on the development of this first asset in preparation for first in human clinical phase 1 study and so forth. And I think it really demonstrates there's high risk, obviously high reward.
Mhm.
And when you think about a drug, and the statistics support this, that an asset that starts in phase 1 has a roughly about a 6% chance of actually getting approved. So there's a lot of intrinsic risk associated with drug development. And I thought the CEO, the chief development officer of this company, took a very pragmatic approach to wanting to dip their toe into developing their own drug by bringing in industry experts to develop the phase 1 IND package for their asset. And I think they probably saved or are saving a lot of money by taking that approach. And they only bring them in at the appropriate time during the development process. So I think organizations are really getting savvy, and it probably explains, Jeff, would you agree not or not, the 300% increase over the past year or so in the use of fractional talent in the biotech pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's a means to an end in a sense, but it also makes a lot of sense.
Right.
I think it's exciting because it allows, it's a true means to move forward, to still bring products to market, to be efficient, to be savvy. I think that's only going to continue to improve.
And there's tremendous value in being able to do that as opposed to the traditional model of, building out the full complement of medical writers and so forth and so on. It gives you that nimble ability to pivot and to uh, scale according to what the business needs are. So scaling, you could look at fractional work as a scaling approach.
1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that ability to scale up and then, as importantly, scale down
Right.
without looking at, layoffs, without looking at large impacts because things are project based, deliverable based. And so that's even just from a, employee perspective, care of human perspective, right? That you're not hiring, over hiring, or doing short term hiring without letting people know.
Right.
There's kind of like everyone's in full understanding and agreement of what this looks like.
Depending on how the data pans out. Yeah, and it's a very good point. So, I mean, history is replete with organizations building out a field medical team of MSLs in anticipation of a positive data readout. And unfortunately, the data readout is not positive, and having to then let these professionals go. And there's a cost associated with that. Whereas if you have somebody in a fractional capacity, they like you said, they know what they're getting themselves into, and it can be much more cost effective for the organization in that unfortunate turn of events where the data does not read out positive. They're going to have to go back to square one. Maybe they're going to have to focus on a different pipeline asset because that asset had a negative data readout. And letting go of the staff that you so carefully and strategically and thoughtfully built up is daunting and heartbreaking and costly. So another way of de-risking, just like that example I gave you of the oncology company having a totally fractional development team with their first asset.